Karen Miller woke up at 5 in the morning as she had done for the past 12 years. The alarm clock's soft beeping pulled her from sleep, and she quickly silenced it to avoid waking her husband Frank, who worked late shifts at the factory. Sunlight had not yet broken through the darkness outside their modest two-story home in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Karen moved quietly through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. At 42, Karen's body showed the signs of someone who spent long hours on her feet. Her hands were steady but slightly rough from constant washing and glove changes. The mirror revealed tired eyes that had witnessed both miracles and tragedies in equal measure during her years as a trauma nurse. At Memorial Hospital, she pulled her light brown hair into a neat ponytail and applied minimal makeup, just enough to look professional but practical for the 12-hour shift ahead. Another day, another chance to make a difference, she whispered to herself. It was a personal mantra that helped her face the daily challenges of the emergency department. The kitchen was quiet as Karen prepared a simple breakfast of toast and coffee. She packed a lunch while glancing at the family calendar on the refrigerator door. Her daughter Lisa had a college application deadline coming up next week. The bright red circle around the date served as a reminder of the mounting expenses they would soon face. Lisa was smart, straight-A student with dreams of becoming a doctor. Karen felt proud but also worried about how they would afford the tuition, even with scholarships. Karen left a note for Frank beside the coffee maker. Love you. Leftovers in the fridge for dinner. Home by 8. Their communication often happened through these little notes due to their opposing work schedules. The drive to Memorial Hospital took exactly 17 minutes in the early morning quiet. Karen knew every turn and traffic light by heart. The hospital building came into view, 6 stories of brick and glass that had been her second home for over a decade. She parked in her usual spot in the staff lot, grabbed her bag, and headed inside. Morning, Karen, called Sam, the elderly security guard who had worked at Memorial even longer than she had. Morning, Sam. How's that grandson of yours doing with baseball? Karen asked, pausing briefly at the security desk. Sam's face lit up. Made the varsity team. First freshman to do it in 15 years. That's wonderful. Tell him Nurse Karen says, congratulations. She smiled warmly before continuing toward the staff locker room. The hospital hallways were relatively quiet at 6:30 a.m. The night shift was wrapping up, and the day shift was just beginning. Karen greeted several colleagues as she made her way to the emergency department. The familiar smells of disinfectant and coffee mingled in the air. In the locker room, Karen changed into her navy blue scrubs and comfortable white shoes. She pinned her ID badge to her top and looped her stethoscope around her neck. Other nurses chatted around her, sharing stories from their days off or discussing difficult cases. Heard it was quiet last night, said Donna, a younger nurse who had started at Memorial 3 years ago. Karen laughed. Never say the Q word. You'll jinx us for sure. It was an old superstition among medical staff, saying a shift was quiet. Guaranteed chaos would follow. Karen had seen it happen too many times to dismiss it entirely. The shift began with the usual handover meeting. The night team looked tired but reported no major incidents. Karen was assigned to Zones 3 and 4 for the day, 8 beds that would likely fill quickly once the morning progressed. She checked equipment, counted medications, and prepared for whatever the day might bring. By mid-morning, Karen had treated a child with a broken arm, an elderly woman with pneumonia, and a construction worker who had fallen from a ladder. Each patient received her full attention and care. She moved efficiently between rooms, checking vital signs, administering medications, and documenting everything in the hospital's computer system. During her quick lunch break in the staff room, Karen chatted with Dr. Patel about Lisa's college plans. She's got her heart set on State University's pre-med program, Karen explained, taking a bite of her sandwich. Smart girl, Dr. Patel nodded. If she needs a recommendation letter, I'd be happy to write one. The world needs more dedicated doctors. That would be amazing, thank you, Karen replied, feeling grateful for her workplace relationships. Around 2 in the afternoon, Karen noticed Alan Peters, the hospital administrator, walking through the emergency department with 2 men in business suits. They seemed to be evaluating everything, making notes on tablets as they moved from section to section. It wasn't unusual to see administration touring the facility, but something about their serious expressions made Karen uneasy. "What's that about?" she asked Nancy, the charge nurse. Nancy lowered her voice. "Rumor has it they're making cuts. Budget. Problems. But don't worry. They always need experienced trauma nurses." Karen tried to push the worry aside and focus on her patients. The afternoon brought a steady stream of cases, nothing major, but enough to keep her busy until she received a message asking her to come to Alan Peters' office at 4. "Can someone cover my patients for a bit?" she asked, trying to hide her concern. "Peters wants to see me." "Sure thing," Nancy replied, giving Karen a reassuring smile. "Probably wants your input on the new triage protocols." Karen walked to the administrative wing, her comfortable shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. She had been in Alan Peters' office only a few times before, usually for annual reviews or to discuss department needs. The hallway seemed longer than usual as she approached the door with "Alan Peters, Hospital Administrator" displayed on a shiny nameplate. She knocked and heard a muffled, "Come in." Alan sat behind his large desk, a folder open in front of him. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Karen, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Karen sat down, noticing the tension in Alan's face. He wasn't someone who smiled often, but today he looked particularly serious. "Karen, you've been with us for 12 years now, and your service has been exemplary," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "I want to start by acknowledging your dedication to Memorial and to your patients." A knot formed in Karen's stomach. This sounded like the beginning of bad news. "Unfortunately, Memorial is facing significant financial challenges," Alan continued. "The board has decided we need to restructure several departments, including emergency services." Karen's mouth went dry. "Restructure?" Alan nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "We're consolidating some positions, and I'm afraid your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. "Eliminated? But what about my patients? My shift isn't even over." "Nancy will reassign them," Alan said. "Human Resources has prepared a severance package." He slid a folder across the desk. 2 months' salary and continuation of benefits for 30 days. There's also information about applying for unemployment. Karen stared at the folder but didn't touch it. 12 years of service reduced to a few papers and an abrupt goodbye. "This isn't about your performance," Alan added hastily. "It's strictly budgetary. We're letting go of 15 staff members today." 15 people. 15 lives disrupted. Karen finally reached for the folder with slightly trembling fingers. "I need to collect my things?" she asked, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Alan nodded. "Security will meet you at your locker. Standard procedure." The walk back to the emergency department felt unreal. Karen moved on autopilot, her mind racing with questions and fears. What would she tell Frank? How would they pay for Lisa's college? Where would she find another nursing position quickly? Word had already spread by the time she reached the staff locker room. Donna was crying in the corner while 2 other nurses tried to comfort her. Karen realized Donna must be among the 15. "Karen, I'm so sorry," Nancy said, meeting her at the door. "This is wrong. You're the best nurse we have." Karen tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "Thanks, Nancy. Take care of everyone for me, okay?" Sam from security stood awkwardly by Karen's locker, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. "I'm just supposed to, make sure everything goes smooth," he mumbled apologetically. Karen nodded. She emptied her locker methodically. Family photos taped to the inside of the door, spare scrubs, comfortable shoes, protein bars for long shifts, a novel she had been reading during breaks for the past month. 12 years of working life fit into one small bag. Several colleagues came to say hasty goodbyes. Some hugged her, some cried. Others made promises to stay in touch. Karen accepted their words with quiet dignity, though inside she felt hollow. As she walked out of Memorial Hospital for what might be the last time, Karen glanced back at the building where she had saved lives. held hands with the dying, celebrated recoveries, and formed deep friendships. The afternoon sun made the windows gleam, giving no hint of the turmoil inside. In her car, Karen finally allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears slid down her cheeks as she gripped the steering wheel. After a few minutes, she wiped her eyes, started the engine, and drove away from Memorial Hospital. She had no idea that tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change everything. Karen barely slept that night. She tossed and turned beside Frank, who had held her close when she broke the news about losing her job. "We'll figure it out," he had promised, though the worry lines on his forehead told a different story. Their mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and Lisa's college deposit deadline loomed just beyond that. The severance package would help, but not for long. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the bedroom curtains. Frank had already left for his early shift at the factory. Karen stared at the ceiling, the reality of unemployment settling heavily on her chest. No patients to check on, no medications to administer, no purpose to her day. She reached for her phone and saw a text from Nancy. "Thinking of you. The emergency department feels empty without you." Karen put the phone down without responding. She wasn't ready to talk about Memorial Hospital yet. After forcing herself to eat a small breakfast, she decided fresh air might clear her head. The Riverside Park was only a 10-minute drive from their home, a peaceful place where she sometimes walked on her days off. The spring morning was cool and bright as Karen parked her car in the nearly empty lot. A few early joggers passed, by nodding polite greetings. Karen walked slowly along the paved path that followed the river's curve. The water moved steadily, catching sunlight in glittering patterns. Birds called from the trees. Under different circumstances, she might have found it beautiful. Her mind kept returning to job possibilities. Should she apply at City Hospital, across town? Would they want someone in her 40s when they could hire younger nurses for less money? Maybe the urgent care clinic needed staff. Or should she consider leaving nursing altogether? The questions swirled endlessly, offering no answers. Karen rounded a bend in the path and noticed a park bench about 50 yards ahead. An elderly man sat alone, throwing something into the water. Probably feeding the ducks, she thought. As she drew closer, she could see he wore a faded blue cap with military insignia. His shoulders were hunched forward, and a small paper bag rested beside him. Something about his posture made Karen slow her steps. The man's right hand was now gripping his left arm tightly. His breathing seemed labored. Her nursing instincts immediately activated, pushing aside her personal troubles. "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" Karen called, quickening her pace. The man turned slightly toward her voice. His face was pale and sweaty, his expression pained. "Just a little indigestion," he managed to say between shallow breaths. Karen reached the bench and quickly assessed the situation. The man appeared to be in his mid-70s. His lips had a slightly bluish tint. He was conscious but clearly in distress. These were classic signs of a cardiac event. "Sir, I'm a nurse. I think you might be having a heart attack. Do you have any chest pain?" Karen asked, already reaching for her phone. The man nodded. "Started about 10 minutes ago. Thought it would pass." "What's your name?" Karen asked, helping him into a better position on the bench. Joe Carter," he replied, grimacing. "Joe, I'm Karen. I'm going to call an ambulance. Do you have any medications with you? Nitroglycerin, maybe?" Joe nodded weakly and gestured toward his jacket pocket. Karen carefully reached in and found a small pill bottle. She quickly read the label, nitroglycerin tablets, prescribed to Joseph Carter for angina. "When did you last take one of these?" Karen asked, opening the bottle. "Haven't yet. Wasn't sure. I'm going to place one under your tongue, okay? It will help open your blood vessels." Karen gently administered the medication while dialing 911 with her other hand. When the emergency operator answered, Karen spoke clearly and professionally. "This is Karen Miller. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside Park with a male patient, approximately 75 years old. experiencing a probable myocardial infarction. Patient is conscious but showing signs of cardiac distress including left arm pain, diaphoresis, and dyspnea. I've administered 1 dose of his prescribed nitroglycerin. We need an ambulance immediately. The operator confirmed help was on the way. Karen placed her phone on speaker mode and set it on the bench so she could properly attend to Joe. Joe, the ambulance is coming. Try to stay calm and breathe slowly, Karen instructed, taking his wrist to monitor his pulse. It was rapid and slightly irregular. Are you allergic to any medications? No, allergies, Joe said, his breathing still labored but a little less desperate after the nitroglycerin. Karen noticed dog tags hanging from a chain around Joe's neck. You were in the military? She asked, partly to keep him alert and partly to gather potentially useful medical information. Joe nodded. Vietnam, 1968 to 1970, Marine Corps. Thank you for your service, Karen said sincerely. Do you have any existing health conditions I should tell the paramedics about? Heart bypass was 5 years ago. High blood pressure, type 2 diabetes. Karen nodded, mentally noting these details. Do you live nearby, Joe? 2 miles bend over on Maple Street. Come here every morning. Feed the ducks. His voice was slightly stronger now, though pain still lined his face. My wife, Marie, used to come with me. She passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry to hear that, Karen said gently. She could hear sirens in the distance now. The ambulance is almost here. Is there someone we should call for you? Family? My daughter, Susan. Her number's in my phone. Joe gestured weakly toward his other pocket. Karen found an older model flip phone and located Susan in the contacts. She made the call, introducing herself and explaining the situation calmly but honestly to Joe's clearly worried daughter. Susan promised to meet them at the hospital immediately. The ambulance arrived moments later, 2 paramedics quickly taking over. Karen provided them with a concise report, Joe's symptoms, the time they began, his medical history, and the medication she had administered. You a doctor? One paramedic asked as they transferred Joe onto a stretcher. Nurse. Trauma department at Memorial, Karen answered automatically before adding, well, until yesterday. The paramedics worked efficiently, attaching a portable ECG monitor to Joe and starting an IV line. Good thing you were here, the female paramedic commented. Minutes matter with cardiac events. Joe reached out and weakly grasped Karen's hand as they prepared to load him into the ambulance. Thank you, he said, his eyes conveying the depth of his gratitude. Karen squeezed his hand gently. You're going to be okay, Joe. They'll take good care of you. Will you come with me? Joe asked, a hint of fear in his voice. Don't want to be alone. Karen looked at the paramedics questioningly. The male paramedic nodded. You can ride along if you want. Might be good to have someone he trusts. Without hesitation, Karen climbed into the ambulance beside Joe's stretcher. As they drove toward the hospital, ironically toward Memorial, she held Joe's hand and monitored his condition. The paramedics worked around her, respecting her medical knowledge. Your daughter Susan will meet us at the hospital, Karen reassured Joe. Just focus on staying calm and breathing steadily. Joe's gaze fixed on Karen's face. Guardian angel, he murmured. Sent to the park. Just when I needed one. Karen smiled softly. Yesterday she had felt useless and lost. Today, her skills had potentially saved a life. The irony wasn't lost on her. Being fired might have put her in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to help Joe. The ambulance pulled up to Memorial's emergency entrance. Karen felt a strange mixture of emotions returning to the hospital she had left just yesterday. Now as a patient's companion rather than an employee, several of her former colleagues were visible through the sliding doors, going about their duties unaware of her approach. As the paramedics prepared to unload Joe, Karen leaned close to him. We're here now. The doctors will take excellent care of you. Joe nodded, his face still pale but his breathing more stable. Thank you for stopping, he said. Most people would have walked by. Karen shook her head. Not where I come from, and certainly not when someone needs help. The ambulance doors opened and Joe was wheeled rapidly into the emergency department. Karen followed, taking a deep breath as she crossed the threshold of Memorial Hospital once again, completely unaware that this chance encounter would lead to extraordinary developments in the next 24 hours. The emergency department at Memorial Hospital was busy, just as it always was on weekday mornings. Karen followed as paramedics wheeled Joe through the automatic doors, calling out his vital signs to the waiting medical team. For a moment, Karen felt the strange sensation of being both an insider and an outsider. This had been her workplace just yesterday. Now she was here as a civilian. Karen? Nancy, the charge nurse, spotted her immediately. What are you doing here? I was with this patient when he had a cardiac event, Karen explained quickly. Found him at the Riverside Park. His name is Joe Carter, Vietnam veteran. History of bypass surgery 5 years ago. Nancy nodded professionally, then added in a softer voice. Good to see you, even under these circumstances. Dr. Wei, the cardiologist on duty, directed the team as they transferred Joe to an examination bay. Karen moved to step back, but Joe's hand reached for hers. Please stay, he said, his voice weak but determined. Karen looked questioningly at Dr. Wei, who shrugged. If you're family, I'm not family, Karen admitted. I'm a nurse. Well, I was until yesterday. I was the one who found him at the park. Dr. Wei's expression shifted to recognition. You're Karen Miller. I heard what happened with the layoffs. That was poorly handled. He glanced at Joe, who was being connected to monitors. Since you have medical training and the patient wants you here, you can stay until family arrives. Karen nodded gratefully and moved to a corner of the bay where she wouldn't interfere with the medical team's work. She watched as they conducted a 12-lead ECG, drew blood samples, and started oxygen therapy. Dr. Wei ordered medication to thin Joe's blood and prevent further clotting. Definite myocardial infarction, Dr. Wei announced after reviewing the ECG. We need to get him to the cath lab right away. Karen knew what this meant. Joe needed cardiac catheterization to locate and possibly clear the blockage in his coronary arteries. Time was critical. A woman in her 40s rushed into the emergency department, her face tight with worry. I'm looking for my father, Joe Carter, she said to the reception desk. Susan? Karen approached her. I'm Karen Miller. I called you from the park. Susan's eyes widened in recognition. You're the nurse who helped my dad? Karen nodded. They're preparing to take him to the cardiac catheterization lab. He's had a heart attack, but he received medical attention quickly, which improves his chances significantly. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Thank you so much for being there. She glanced toward the treatment bay. Can I see him before they take him? Of course, I'll show you. Karen led Susan to Joe's bedside. The reunion between father and daughter was brief but emotional. Susan took Joe's hand, her voice breaking as she told him everything would be okay. Joe managed a weak smile. This lady saved me, he told Susan, looking toward Karen. My guardian angel. Susan turned to Karen with fresh gratitude in her eyes. How can I ever thank you? No need for thanks, Karen assured her. I'm just glad I was there. A team arrived to transport Joe to the catheterization lab. Dr. Wei explained the procedure to Susan and Joe, describing how they would thread a catheter through a blood vessel to locate and treat the blockage. Karen listened quietly, knowing the procedure well from her years at Memorial. As they prepared to wheel Joe away, he reached for Karen's hand one last time. Will you still be here when I come back? Karen hesitated. She had no official reason to stay at the hospital that had just fired her, but something in Joe's eyes, trust, hope, fear, made her decision easy. Yes, I'll wait with your daughter. Joe nodded, visibly relieved. The medical team then wheeled him toward the elevators, Susan following closely after giving Karen another grateful look. Left alone in the now empty bay, Karen felt suddenly out of place. Several of her former colleagues passed by, some stopping, to exchange brief awkward greetings. Everyone had heard about the layoffs and no one quite knew what to say. Karen eventually made her way to the waiting area, finding a quiet corner where she could sit without attracting too much attention. Time passed slowly. Karen checked her phone and saw several missed calls from Frank. She texted him a brief explanation of where she was and why. His reply came quickly. "That's my Karen, always helping others. Love you." Susan returned from the catheterization lab. After about an hour, looking drained but hopeful. She spotted Karen and came straight over. "They found a major blockage in one of his arteries," Susan explained, sitting beside Karen. "They're putting in a stent right now. The doctor says he's stable." "That's good news," Karen said with genuine relief. "The fact that they found the blockage and can treat it directly is very positive." Susan nodded, then studied Karen more carefully. "You said on the phone that you were a nurse here until yesterday. What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Karen explained about the budget, cuts and sudden layoffs. As she spoke, she realized it was actually helping to talk about it to someone who wasn't family or a former colleague. Susan listened with growing disbelief. "They just let you go, after 12 years? That's terrible." She shook her head. "And then the very next day you saved my father's life. Talk about their loss being his gain." "I'm just glad I was at the park this morning," Karen said simply. "That wasn't just coincidence," Susan insisted. "That was fate." She paused, then added, "My father is very special to me. After Mom died, it's just been the two of us. I don't know what I would have done if—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Karen understood. "My husband Patrick works in Washington," Susan continued after a moment. "He couldn't get away today, but he's flying in tonight. He's going to want to thank you personally." "That's really not necessary," Karen began, but Susan cut her off gently. "It is to us. Trust me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Eventually, Dr. Wei appeared in the waiting area, still wearing his procedure gown. His expression was calm as he approached them. "The procedure went well," he announced. "We placed a stent in the blocked artery, and blood flow has been restored. Mr. Carter is stable and being transferred to the cardiac care unit." Both women exhaled in relief. Susan thanked the doctor profusely before turning back to Karen. "Would you come up with me? I know he'd want to see you." Karen hesitated only briefly before nodding. Together, they took the elevator to the cardiac care unit on the 4th floor. The unit was quieter than the emergency department, with soft beeping from monitors and nurses moving efficiently between rooms. Joe had been settled into a private room. He looked pale against the white hospital sheets, but his eyes were open and alert. An IV line delivered medication, and a heart monitor tracked his vital signs with reassuring steadiness. "Dad," Susan said softly as they entered. "Look who I brought." Joe's face brightened visibly when he saw Karen. "My guardian angel returned," he said, his voice stronger than before. Karen smiled warmly. "The doctor says the procedure went well. How are you feeling?" "Like an elephant was sitting on my chest earlier," Joe admitted. "Much better now. Thanks to you. I just happened to be in the right place," Karen said modestly. Joe shook his head. "Not just happened. Meant to be." He looked at his daughter. "Susan, this lady saved my life. Remember that." Susan nodded solemnly. "I won't forget, Dad." She turned to Karen. "I called Patrick while you were with the doctor. He wants to speak with you." Before Karen could respond, Susan was holding out her phone. Somewhat bewildered, Karen accepted it. "Hello?" she said. "Is this Karen Miller?" a deep male voice asked. "Yes, this is Karen." "Ms. Miller, this is Patrick Carter, Susan's husband. I understand you saved my father-in-law's life today. I just helped him get medical attention quickly," Karen clarified. "According to the doctors, those minutes made all the difference," and Patrick said firmly. "Joe is very important to our family. What you did today means everything to us." "I'm glad I could help," Karen said simply. "Ms. Miller, there's something you should know about me. Patrick continued. I work as a senior advisor to the president, and I believe your story is one he would very much like to hear. Karen's free hand gripped the edge of Joe's bed for support. Had she heard correctly? A senior advisor to the President of the United States? I don't understand, she managed to say. I'll explain everything tomorrow, Patrick promised. For now, please know that what you did today matters. Not just to our family, but potentially to many others. Could I have your contact information? Someone from my office will be in touch very soon. In a daze, Karen provided her phone number and address. After a few more words of gratitude, the call ended. She handed the phone back to Susan, who was watching her with a knowing smile. My husband can be intense, Susan said apologetically. But he means well. Karen nodded, still processing the conversation. She looked at Joe, who seemed pleased but not surprised by this turn of events. Told you, Joe said quietly. Guardian angels get noticed. Karen stayed with Joe and Susan for another hour, until Joe fell asleep and visiting hours ended. She promised Susan she would return tomorrow, then headed home with her mind spinning from the day's events. On the drive, she tried to make sense of Patrick Carter's words. Why would the president be interested in her story? It seemed too strange to be real. Frank was waiting for her when she arrived home. He had prepared dinner, spaghetti with garlic bread, a simple meal that was one of their favorites. Lisa was at the kitchen table working on homework, but she looked up when Karen entered. Mom, Dad told me what happened at the park. That's amazing. Lisa jumped up to hug her mother. Karen hugged her daughter back, then settled at the table to eat and share the full story. Frank and Lisa listened with growing astonishment as she described not only saving Joe, but also the strange phone call from his son-in-law. An advisor to the president? Frank repeated, his fork paused midway to his mouth. Are you sure that's what he said? Karen nodded. That's what he told me. Susan confirmed it. What do you think it means? Lisa asked, her homework forgotten. Karen shook her head. I have no idea. Maybe he just wants to send a thank you note or something. Frank looked thoughtful. It might be more than that. The president has been focused on healthcare issues lately. Maybe they're looking for stories like yours. But I'm unemployed now, Karen pointed out. Not exactly a healthcare success story. That might be exactly why they're interested, Frank suggested. A dedicated nurse with years of experience, laid off due to budget cuts, who still saves a veteran's life the very next day? That's a powerful story. Karen hadn't considered this angle. She ate silently for a moment, wondering if Frank might be right. After dinner, Karen tried to focus on updating her resume, but her mind kept wandering to the events of the day. Around 9 o'clock, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Is this Karen Miller? A professional female voice asked. Yes, this is Karen. Ms. Miller, my name is Olivia Bennett. I'm calling from the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence. Do you have a moment to speak? Karen sat down abruptly on the couch. Yes, I do, she managed to say, gesturing frantically for Frank to come listen. Excellent. I understand you assisted a veteran named Joseph Carter during a medical emergency yesterday, is that correct? Yes, that's right. And you're a former nurse at Memorial Hospital? Until very recently? Yes, until 2 days ago. I was laid off due to budget cuts. Olivia made a sympathetic sound. I'm sorry to hear that. Mr. Patrick Carter has brought your story to our attention. The president has a particular interest in both veterans' affairs and healthcare issues, and he was quite moved by what happened. Frank's eyes were wide as he listened beside Karen. She put the phone on speaker mode. I'm honored, but it was really just doing what anyone with medical training would do, Karen said. Perhaps, Olivia replied. But not everyone who loses their job one day would stop to help a stranger the next. The president would like to personally recognize your actions. Karen felt her heart skip a beat. Recognize? Yes. The president will be hosting a small ceremony next week, honoring civilian heroes and contributions to veterans' well-being. He would like to invite you to Washington as an honored guest. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "The president wants me to come to Washington?" Karen repeated, hardly believing her own words. "Yes, Ms. Miller. The White House would cover all travel expenses for you and a guest. The ceremony will be on Thursday next week. Would you be available?" Karen looked at Frank, who was nodding vigorously. "Yes, I would be available." "Wonderful. Additionally, I should mention that Secretary Linda Harrison from the Department of Veterans Affairs will be attending. She has expressed interest in speaking with you about a potential opportunity." "Opportunity?" Karen echoed. "I don't have the details, but I understand it may be related to veterans' healthcare initiatives. Now, I'll need to email you some information about the visit, security protocols, and scheduling. Could you confirm your email address?" Karen provided. Her email, still feeling like she might be dreaming. Olivia took down a few more details, promised that formal documents would arrive tomorrow, and ended the call with warm congratulations. The moment she hung up, Frank wrapped Karen in a tight hug. "Did that just happen? Did you just get invited? To the White House by the president?" Lisa came running from her bedroom, having overheard the conversation. "Mom, you're going to meet the president." Karen sank deeper into the couch, overwhelmed. "I can't believe this is real." "Believe it," Frank said firmly. "You deserve this recognition, and who knows what this Secretary Harrison wants to talk to you about. It could be a job opportunity." "A government job?" Karen wondered aloud. "In veterans' health care?" "It makes sense," Frank pointed out. "Who better to help veterans than someone who just saved a veteran's life? Someone with your experience and compassion?" The rest of the evening passed in a blur of excitement and disbelief. Karen checked her email repeatedly until, just before midnight, a message arrived from Olivia Bennett with the official White House seal. The email contained details about the ceremony, travel arrangements, hotel accommodations, and security requirements. It was real. Karen barely slept that night, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. What would she say to the president? What might Secretary Harrison want to discuss? Should she buy a new outfit for the ceremony? The questions kept coming, but one thought rose above the others. If she hadn't lost her job, she wouldn't have been at the park yesterday morning. She wouldn't have saved Joe. She wouldn't be going to Washington. Morning came with bright sunlight and the chirping of birds outside their bedroom window. Karen opened her eyes, half expecting to discover the previous day had been a dream. But her phone showed new messages, one from Susan thanking her again and asking if she'd heard from Patrick's office, and another from Olivia with additional information about the White House visit. Frank was already up making coffee in the kitchen. "I called in to work," he announced when Karen appeared. "Told them I need next week off for a family matter. My supervisor wasn't happy, but I've never missed a day in 3 years. He'll get over it." Karen smiled gratefully. "You don't have to come with me." "Are you kidding? My wife is being honored by the president. Wild horses couldn't keep me away." He handed her a mug of coffee. "Besides, someone needs to take pictures to show the grandkids someday." Lisa came bouncing into the kitchen, already dressed for school, but clearly too excited to focus on education today. "Mom, can I tell my friends, please?" "Let's keep it quiet until after it happens," Karen suggested. "It still doesn't feel real." After breakfast, Karen decided to visit Joe at the hospital. She wanted to thank him and Susan for connecting her with Patrick, though she still couldn't quite believe where that connection was leading. Memorial Hospital looked different in the morning light. Karen entered through the main doors rather than the staff entrance, feeling strange as she signed in as a visitor. The receptionist recognized her and gave her a sympathetic smile. "Joe Carter?" Karen asked. "He was admitted to the cardiac care unit yesterday." The receptionist checked her computer. "Room 412, he's been moved to a regular room, that's a good sign." Karen took the elevator to the 4th floor. As she walked down the hallway, she passed several former colleagues who stopped to chat briefly, many expressing outrage over the layoffs. Karen thanked them but kept her news about the White House invitation to herself. It still felt too fragile to share widely. When she reached room 412, the door was partially open. Karen knocked gently and heard Joe's voice call, "Come in." Joe was sitting up in bed looking remarkably better than the day before. Some color had returned to his face, and he was eating breakfast. Susan sat in a chair beside him, and next to her stood a tall man in a crisp suit who Karen immediately guessed was Patrick. "Karen," Joe greeted her warmly. "Come meet my son-in-law properly." Patrick Carter stepped forward with an extended hand and a warm smile. "Ms. Miller, it's an honor to meet you in person. I understand you've already received a call from the White House?" Karen nodded, shaking his hand. "Yes, last night. It's overwhelming." Patrick's smile widened. "I hope in a good way. The president was genuinely moved by your story. A dedicated nurse who loses her job due to budget cuts, then uses those same skills to save a veteran's life the very next day. It highlights so many important issues about healthcare, veteran services, and the human spirit. I just did what needed to be done," Karen said simply. "And that's exactly why your story matters," Patrick replied. "Too many people look the other way. You didn't." Susan stood and hugged Karen. "We can never thank you enough." Joe nodded from his bed. "Told you guardian angels get noticed." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Karen bought a new navy blue suit for the ceremony, something professional but not too formal. Frank dusted off his only suit and had it cleaned. They packed carefully, following the guidelines provided by Olivia Bennett. Lisa was disappointed she couldn't miss school to join them, but promised to watch the ceremony online if it was streamed. On Wednesday morning, a black car with government plates arrived at their home. The driver, a polite young man named Steve, helped with their luggage and drove them to the airport. Karen and Frank had never received such treatment before. At the airport, they were escorted through security and guided to their gate. The flight to Washington, D.C. was smooth, and another car was waiting when they landed. "Welcome to Washington," said the new driver, a woman named Maria. "We'll take you directly to your hotel. The ceremony is tomorrow at 10 a.m., but someone from the president's staff will meet you this evening to go over details." The hotel was far more luxurious than anywhere Karen and Frank had ever stayed. Their room overlooked the National Mall, with the Washington Monument visible in the distance. Frank stood at the window taking pictures with his phone. "Can you believe this?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "My wife, the hero." Karen smiled but shook her head. "I'm not a hero, Frank. I just did my job. Even when it wasn't your job anymore," he pointed out. "That's what makes it special." At 6 o'clock, there was a knock on their door. A young man in a suit introduced himself as Daniel Webb from the White House staff. "Ms. Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking Karen's hand. "I'm here to brief you on tomorrow's ceremony and answer any questions you might have." They sat in the room's sitting area while Daniel explained the schedule. "The ceremony will begin at 10 a.m. in the East Room. You'll be one of 5 citizens being recognized for exceptional service. The president will speak about each honoree before presenting you with a civilian service medal." Karen's eyes widened. "A medal? No one mentioned that part." Daniel smiled. "The president wanted it to be a surprise, but I thought you should know in advance so you wouldn't be caught off guard." "Will I need to make a speech?" Karen asked nervously. "No speech required, though the president might ask you a question or two. Just be yourself," Daniel assured her. "After the ceremony, there will be a small reception. That's when Secretary Harrison from Veterans Affairs would like to speak with you privately." "Do you know what that's about?" Frank asked. Daniel looked apologetic. "I'm afraid I don't have those details, but I understand it's a positive opportunity." He handed Karen a folder. "Here's your security clearance and schedule for tomorrow. A car will pick you up at 8:30 a.m. After Daniel left, Karen and Frank ordered room service dinner, still adjusting to the surreal experience. Joe had called earlier to wish them well, saying he would be watching the ceremony from home. He had been discharged from the hospital but was still recovering. "Secretary Harrison," Karen mused as they ate. "What do you think she wants to discuss?" Frank reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Whatever it is, it has to be better than being unemployed." They slept fitfully, both too excited and nervous for deep rest. Morning came quickly and Karen spent extra time on her appearance, wanting to look professional for the cameras that would surely be present. Frank put on his freshly cleaned suit, adding a small American flag pin to his lapel. The car arrived, precisely at 8:30 a.m. As they drove through Washington, Karen watched the impressive government buildings pass by, her stomach fluttering with nerves. When they reached the White House, security was thorough but efficient. Staff members guided them through the process and led them into the building. Karen had seen the White House on television many times, but walking through its historic halls was entirely different. The ceilings were higher than she had imagined, the artwork more vivid, the sense of history more powerful. They were led to a waiting area where the other honorees were gathering. There was a teacher who had saved students during a school emergency, a teenager who had developed an app to help seniors, a firefighter who had rescued a family from a flooding river, and an elderly man who had founded a successful literacy program. Everyone exchanged nervous smiles and brief introductions. Karen listened to their stories with genuine interest, feeling humbled to be included among them. A staff member provided water and answered questions as they waited. At precisely 10 a.m., they were led into the East Room. Karen gasped softly at the sight. The room was filled with guests, media, and officials. Flags stood at attention behind, a podium bearing the presidential seal. Frank squeezed her hand reassuringly as they were directed to special seats in the front row. A voice announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." Everyone stood as the president entered the room. He moved with confident steps to the podium, smiling and nodding to guests. Karen had seen him countless times on television, but his presence in person was far more commanding. The president welcomed everyone and spoke about the importance of ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. He then began to recognize each honoree, starting with the teacher. One by one, they were called forward to receive their medals and shake the president's hand while cameras flashed. "Our next honoree," the president said, "represents the very best of American healthcare workers. Karen Miller dedicated 12 years as a trauma nurse at Memorial Hospital, saving countless lives. When budget cuts eliminated her position, she could have focused on her own troubles. Instead, the very next day, she used her medical training to save Vietnam veteran Joseph Carter during a cardiac event at a public park. Her story reminds us that true professionals never stop serving, even when circumstances change." Karen heard, her name called, and rose on slightly shaky legs. Frank whispered, "You got this," as she walked forward. The president's handshake was warm and firm. "Thank you for your service, Ms. Miller," he said as he placed the medal around her neck. "Both, to your patients and to our veterans." "Thank you, Mr. President," Karen replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I understand you're currently seeking new employment?" the president asked, keeping his voice low enough that only nearby microphones would catch it. "Yes, sir," Karen confirmed. The president smiled. "I have a feeling that situation might change very soon." He gestured toward an elegant woman in the front row. "Secretary Harrison is looking forward to speaking with you." Karen returned to her seat, the medal feeling both heavy and uplifting, around her neck. Frank beamed with pride beside her as the ceremony continued. Afterward, at the reception, Secretary Linda Harrison approached them. She was tall and dignified, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Ms. Miller, congratulations," she said warmly. "I wonder if we might speak privately for a moment." They moved to a quieter corner of the room. Secretary Harrison came straight, to the point. "The Department of Veterans Affairs is launching a new program focused on emergency response for veterans in crisis. We need someone with your background to help develop and lead it." Karen listened with growing surprise as the secretary outlined a position that would utilize her nursing expertise while adding administrative and training responsibilities. The salary was nearly double what she had earned at Memorial Hospital. "We need people who understand both medical emergencies and the unique needs of veterans," Secretary Harrison explained. "Your experience and your actions with Mr. Carter demonstrate you have both the skills and the heart for this role." I don't know what to say," Karen admitted. "Say you'll consider it." The secretary smiled. "We can discuss details after you've had time to think." Karen rejoined Frank, her mind spinning with the unexpected offer. He took one look at her face and knew something significant had happened. "Good news?" he asked. "Very good news," Karen confirmed. "I'll tell you everything back at the hotel." As they prepared to leave the White House, Karen spotted a familiar face. Patrick Carter was making his way toward them with a broad smile. "The president was very impressed with you," Patrick said. "And I hear Secretary Harrison made her offer?" Karen nodded. "It's incredible. I never expected any of this." Patrick's expression grew serious. "When you helped Joe that day, you weren't looking for recognition or reward. That's precisely why you deserve both." He handed Karen a business card. "Joe is doing well, by the way. He wanted me to tell you that you're welcome at our family dinners anytime." On the car ride back to the hotel, Karen held her medal in one hand and Frank's hand in the other. She thought about the whirlwind of the past week, losing her job, saving Joe, receiving the presidential invitation, and now being offered an exciting new position. "It's funny," she said quietly. "If I hadn't been fired, I wouldn't have been at that park. I wouldn't have met Joe. None of this would have happened." Frank nodded. "Life has strange ways of working out sometimes." Karen looked out the window, at the Washington Monument gleaming in the distance. 2 days ago, I was an unemployed nurse wondering how we'd pay the bills. Now I have a medal from the president and a job offer from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And it all started because even when life knocked you down, you still stopped to help someone else," Frank said proudly. "That's who you are, Karen. That's why I love you." Karen smiled, feeling a sense of peace and purpose that